All right, hello everyone. We are ready to get started. It's the top of the hour. I want to thank all of you for joining today, wherever you are in the world. We're so delighted to have you. My name is Jennifer Morse. I'm the Director of Customer Success here at MadCap Software, and joining me today is my wonderful colleague, Paul Stoecklein, Director of Documentation here at MadCap. Now, today's session is all about project checklists in MadCap Central, and whether you're a team of one or a team of many, keeping track of your development progress can be so helpful, especially as your source content starts to scale. So we thought we'd have a little fun with this today. This webinar is going to be a little bit different than other webinars we've done in the past, and that it won't be very PowerPoint focused. We thought it would be fun to sort of channel our inner James Lipton and make this more of a conversational show and tell session. So our goal today is to talk about and show a real world look at how checklists in Central have saved MadCap Software's documentation team from hours of manually kept spreadsheets, notes to manage their progress through a release cycle, information lodged in people's brains. And we want to talk about what checklists are, the types of checklists you can create, and how they differ from things like tasks. So welcome, Paul. So happy to have you with me today.
Hi there, Jen. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, so as always, we have a lot to cover. So I'm just going to kind of cover these two items of business before we begin, and let me make sure my screen is sharing here. Again, this webinar will be recorded like all of our webinars, so if you have to pop out early, don't worry, we'll send you a link to the recording as soon as it's done. There's also a go-to question panel, so if you've got questions as we're presenting, please use that to drop in some questions there, and we'll make sure we get to what we can at the end. Whatever we don't get to live, we'll certainly follow up with a question and answer document. So I'm really excited to dive into this because this is a really important feature in Central. But before we do, I just want to remind everybody what MadCap Central is. We may have some new folks on the call who may not even know what is this Central thing she's even talking about. So just to kind of level set the stage and kind of break this down, what MadCap Central is, it's our cloud-based platform that we developed to help you plan, help you track, manage processes, Flare content, and the teams that are responsible for producing documentation. So it's not meant to replace Flare, it's meant to work with Flare. And it does a lot of things, and it solves a lot of problems that Flare doesn't solve on its own as a desktop tool. So for example, source control is a biggie. Teams of writers need an easy to use version control solution that everybody can use. Even if you're one person, source control can be great. And not everybody has resources readily available to get IT to set something up for you or configured. Central makes this really easy to do with a couple of clicks. And you have instant source control. As a single author, you're covered. And if you're with a team, then you all can easily collaborate. Task management, kind of the focus today. You know, when we built Central, we observed not only how the MadCap documentation team worked, but how other teams worked. How did everybody stay organized when it's time to get content out the door? How does everybody know what everybody should be working on? And this is an area where Central can help. We've created this really easy to use task board and these project checklists to keep everybody on task. So going to be the focus today, but a couple other things to mention too, just so you know. There's also a review workflow in Central. Getting subject matter experts involved has been tricky. Now, we did offer a desktop tool for some time called Contributor to have SMEs part of the workflow and the review process, but we often heard it was tricky to get SMEs to install and use another piece of software. So what we've done with Central is we've done away with the need to install any kind of desktop tool. This new review workflow with Central means your SMEs can now edit and collaborate on your source content using an extremely simple, lightweight web-based editor, not meant to look like Flare, not meant to feel like Flare, it's meant to be easy. So we keep the power of Flare as a desktop tool for the author, and now we pair it with this really easy to use web-based editor for the subject matter experts. Other things that Central can do, it offers a build management feature where we can tell it to build our targets in the middle of the night easily. We don't have to purchase an additional build server or configure another build license. Easy and Central to do. Optionally, it offers content hosting. If we want to make our content available live to our customers, we can use it as a hosting engine, and a really easy to use translation management feature if any of our content has to be translated. And then lastly, output analytics. So if we're generating HTML5 content, we can use Central as a window into really important business analytics, data analytics, to understand how are customers using our outputs? What searches are they using? Are they searching for content that isn't in there? Did something lead to a more expensive support call? And the beauty about the output analytics, and I'll mention this, I know this is not our focus today, but I do want to mention, with output analytics, your HTML5 outputs can be hosted anywhere. They don't have to be in Central. They can be published to your own private web server where content is behind a firewall. It's that flexible. So it does a lot of things. Our focus today, though, is going to be on the task management feature of Central. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you, Paul, since we can talk a little bit about that. So what we're going to do is kind of start with this, and hopefully, Paul, you can, you got that request to share your screen.
I do. I'm trying to, I need to, am I showing my dogs or am I showing Central?
We can all see your dogs.
Okay. Now can you see Central?
Yes, we can. So again,
we could look at my dogs if you want.
Today we're going to talk about Central. We can talk about your dogs later.
Okay. We'll do that.
Yeah, that bullet about the task management, that's really the focus today. And it's a broad feature, and we want to break this down and talk about it in more detail. You know, what does this mean in Central, and how is a real documentation team using Central for project management? So Paul, first off, you know, tell us about the impetus for using tasks and checklists on your team.
Okay. Yeah, it actually goes back a long way. So ever since I've been doing technical writing forever, it's one of the big challenges. You have your regular job, but then you you sort of have to figure out how you're going to keep track of everything. But I actually kind of like that. I don't think I know a tech writer who doesn't like to check things off of a list. I kind of like that, but it was always a big challenge. And I'm not a big sticky notes person. My wife is, but I'll have a notebook and just try to keep track of everything. Well, eventually starting to work in tools like Flare, there's so much that you need to keep track of. You're just manually putting something in a notebook or on a sticky note isn't going to cut it. So, and there's different tools out there for managing things. But I had a big challenge with the fact that nothing could really talk to my Flare project and get to connect to my Flare files. So I first created Word documents and tables, and then I thought, well, probably would be better to put this in Excel. So I had somebody, you know, I never work in Excel. I had somebody put one together, and I wanted to do some calculations and things like that. So this is actually, I'm going to drag this in here. This is actually a spreadsheet we used to use years ago that we first started with, and it's big and ugly and kind of overbearing, but it did the trick. And the idea here was had all the product tabs down here at the bottom, and I would put folders and the topics, the exact topics that I wanted to track something. And then across the top, there are all these columns, all these things that I wanted to keep track of. Did I do this? Did I do that? And you can see that we tried to do some calculations, but it never seemed to work real well. It wasn't real consistent and reliable. You can see that this one says I was 187.5% done with this. And of course, I never was 187% done with anything. So it was a challenge. And one of the biggest problems was I had to, this became so hard to manage. And every time we had a new release or something, I had to go in and manually enter the names of tasks and folders and move things around. And so I just wanted something better. So we introduced Central, and I was really pushing hard to get this functionality into Central. I showed the others in R&D the kinds of things that I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to be able to tie into specific topics and have multiple checklists and have it do calculations for me so I could see what progress I'm making. And that's kind of where it all started. It started with that, just kind of had the need for it, and tasks, which we'll talk about a little bit, that wasn't enough to get the job done for what I really wanted. And so we added checklists.
And so, I mean, obviously, we can do tasks, we can do checklists, but what kinds of checklists can you actually create? How do you actually put them into practice?
Okay, well, let's just look at the interface here. So anybody listening to this, if you've never seen Central before, this is what it looks like when you first open it up. And I've got some objects on here, and these are widgets. We'll come back to that. And then you've got these pages here on the left where you can navigate to go to different things. And the checklists, unfortunately, I kind of wish they were out here on the side along with tasks, because I think they're kind of hidden for people and they don't know about them. But the checklists along with this analytics, those are my favorite things in Central. And if we just had those two things, I would be happy as can be. That's where 95% of my time is spent. So to answer your question, you go into projects, and here you can see I've uploaded some kind of test project. This is a test license. This isn't the license I normally work in. This is sort of my sandbox. And so I have these just short little projects that I open, and click on one of those, and there's the dashboard for this particular project. I got some more widgets, and actually I think I have to refresh here. And oh, that was my fault. There we go. All right, so click it, open it up, and you got all these options across the top here. You got your dashboard, builds, checklists. So I open up checklists, and there are two basic kinds of checklists you can build. Right now I don't have any. You can see it's all empty here on the left, but this little bit of help text helps you get started, tells you kind of what to do to get going with checklists. And the first thing you'll do is you'll click that plus button, and you can set up a checklist. I can give it a name in here. I'm just going to call it test. And then there are these two different kinds of checklists. There's project files checklists, and there are generic checklists. So a project files checklist, that's really what I wanted when I was talking to everybody in R&D about this. I wanted to connect to my project files. So that's what this lets you do. It lets you pick any of the files in your project, and it can be not just topics, it can be anything that's in your project, snippets and images and project files too, TOCs, skins, anything that you want to keep track of. But then there's also this generic checklist here. And that is one where you're not picking Flare files. You're not really connecting to that. It's just a checklist of anything that you want. So you create the rows and the columns in that, and it just creates this grid for you. So I use both kinds of checklists. Those are the two main types that you're going to create, though.
And can you show us kind of an example, maybe do like can you create a quick project or a generic checklist and kind of show us the differences between what's possible in each of these?
Yeah, sure. So let's do the project one first. Let's just call this feature one. This is what happens a lot when we'll have a new Flare release or a product release for any of our products, and we understand what the new features are going to be. So a lot of my topic checklists are feature driven. So whatever the feature is, I'll name my checklist after that. Then I make sure that project files is selected in here. Templates, will come back to that. I could put a description in here, whatever. So maybe that will give other writers on a team a clue as to what a checklist is all about. Now, I picked the project files. So it is going to let me create columns in here, and the columns can be anything that you want to track. Now, I have probably I think I've got about a dozen things that I like to track. So edit, like I want to know, have I edited this thing? Maybe have I put in meta a meta description for it? Have I done spell check? So it's anything that you want to track in here. Have I put in micro content? Is it been reviewed? So you add these, and the order that you add them is the order that they're going to show up across the top. So edit is the top one, and so that's going to be the far left. Reviewed is going to be on the far right, and you can use these arrows to move things, back and forth as you want. Again, I got about a dozen things that I track, but I'm not going to put them all in there. And then you just click this.
This is great. So really, I mean, you know, every team's going to be a little bit different. But it's clear that it's more than just writing stuff, right? There's the little workflows that you guys have to create, which is important. So this is flexible for teams to create their own workflows that make sense for them, right?
Exactly. Something that I want to track isn't necessarily something that somebody else wants to track. I have banners that I put in a lot of topics, and so that's one of the things that one of my column headings. Well, other people, that may mean nothing to them. Other people might have, a few different review columns, different kinds of people that they want to take it these topics through to be reviewed. So yeah, you can completely customize this. It's really nice to be able to do that. Then you click the rows tab. And so instead of manually putting in rows, entering those, what it does is it knows that I went into this project, which is this particular project is called Module 1. And it's identified, okay, here's all your content files, which come from the Content Explorer and Flare and Project Organizer files. Even your main FLPRJ file is in here. So then you just go in and you say, well, what do you want to be part of this checklist? I always deselect all of these things first. Because it's normally when I'm creating a checklist, it's just a small subset of all the files that I have. So I don't want everything to show up. So I start with that. I could select project files, go in there and select those things, but I'm almost always doing topics. So I go into the content folder, and you can see the subfolders that are in your project, and I could just select the folder and it'll select all the topics that are underneath that, or I could expand and I could just select individually whatever files that I want. It's pretty much that simple. And then you just click save, and it's going to load this thing. Now the name of the checklist is over here on the left. So if I have more checklists, they'll be listed, and I can just select whichever one I want to open. And then you get this interface, which is pretty nice. You have this diagram and some data across the top. So I didn't have to do any Excel calculations. It's just all happens for me. You can see I don't have anything done. And it has these breadcrumbs. As you click on these links, you drive down into the files, the subfolders and the files. And you go far enough to where you get to just files. And now you've got all these little circles where you can click away to check things off as you do them. And if you need to go back, you just navigate through the breadcrumbs, and it's very easy to do that. We'll start working on some documentation, and I'll open up my checklist, and I'll have that open as I'm working, and I'll just start checking things off. Have I edited this thing? So the way to use this, you can just left click and it will change the status. And there's 3 or 4 statuses in here. This one just means in progress. If I click it again, that means it's complete. If I click it again, that's not applicable. And if I again, I'm back to the first one of to do. I got to do this. Or I can right click and I can select it from a list. The other thing that's nice is I could select, sometimes I'll have 10, 15, 20 files in here, and I know that maybe something I don't need to do. Maybe I'll have a column in here that says context sensitive help. And I know that, hey, I don't need to create context sensitive help for any of these things in here. I can just click the gear and I can don't worry about it. But as I click and I start checking things off, you can see the graph at the top is changing in the the numbers are changing. Not only that, and it breaks it down to all of my columns, so I can tell, I can see how many things I've done out of how many, and it gives me a percentage. And it's also really nice because I can look over to the left and see the total percentage of how far done this particular checklist is. And that just makes tech writers giddy, because we love to check things off and feel like we're making progress.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's nothing more gratifying than clicking that done or completed button. What about notes? So I see there's a notes column there. I know that can be helpful sometimes, as your own team has scaled, people are coming on, they're using this thing. You could have a lot of files on this list. How might you use that notes column over there on the far right?
Okay, that's a great question. Yeah, so we have this notes area over here, and it starts out on the left. You can move it over, pin it to the left if you'd rather have it further over in front of everything. I usually keep it over on the right. So kind of have two different answers here, one for each kind of checklist that I create. The topic checklists are that's by far that's the most common checklist that I'm creating. And what I usually use the note section for there is to remind myself of maybe something in particular that I still need to do. Maybe this particular feature right here is I'm in progress. I've got a lot of these things done, but I haven't finished the editing part. And well, what is it? What do I need to do? I know that I've done a lot. Well, maybe I need to replace the video link or something like that. So I'll just put in notes like that. It's a good reminder. Now, the other way that I use notes kind of has to do with the other kind of checklist. So maybe we should look at the other kind of checklist, and we'll see.
Yeah, now I did have one thing to point out though.
Sure.
So I'm curious here. So when you've got these project level checklists, because you're tying it into your Flare project, I'm guessing then every time you add a new topic to your project, this is something you can easily use and track, right? You don't have to think about editing or a spreadsheet or adding workflows to a new topic that you add to this folder, right? As if you add it in Flare, it's going to show up here and you can start tracking it.
Well, yeah, so what happens is as long as you push your files, you mentioned in the beginning about how this is a source control solution. So it's sort of this constant process of making changes locally in Flare and synchronizing them with Central. So you add new topics or new files locally, and then you synchronize those, and then they're available. They don't necessarily show up in a checklist that you've created, but they're available for you to select. So I could add another topic or two, or several other files, and then I can go in and I can edit this checklist. So I just click that little pen button right there, and I can change anything I want about it on any of these tabs. So I can go into my rows, and I can just know that, hey, I added this new topic in here, and I want to make sure I track some information about that, and maybe this one too, or let's go under here, and let's just do the main features one. And I click save, and it's going to reload, and you can see this is one that I just now added. I just added this, and I don't have to redo columns or anything. It's just there for me to start working with. And because I added more files, my percentage went down because these start out as to do. So everything just kind of happens automatically.
Got it. So the rows are not arbitrary. Those are tying into your project files, but the columns are arbitrary. So you mentioned there was another type of checklist. Can we show us a little bit about the generic one? How do you guys use those?
Okay. So as I said, the vast majority of my checklists are these topic ones, but I do like the generic ones also for different purposes. And one of the purposes, so just click that to create a new one, is kind of an overall release to-do list. So we have our release cycles, and so we're working on the next release cycle for both Central and Flare. And in addition to all of these features that I need to write, and I need to track my progress. There's also this overall process that I have to go through, things I need to make sure that I've done. So I call it a release to-do list. And so I would come in here and instead of project files, I'd select generic list, and I'll just put in a description. So that's everything I got to do in this release. Now, I come in here to columns. What are the things that I've got to track or I've got to do? And I sort of think in terms of the timeline. What are the first things that I need to do for this? Well, I need to research stuff. Press enter. There it goes. I need to fix bugs, maybe. I need to replace images for lots of things. I need to replace URLs. So there's all these things, and I need to test output, just a whole bunch of stuff. I think I have about 25 rows that oh, you know what? I did this backwards. Sorry. Okay, we're going to use delete here. I was thinking in terms of rows. This is columns. Columns, it can be as simple as complete, or you could put in different people's names. I set us back a few minutes. So let's say that Jen is a writer on my team. She's not. I would hire Jen, but she's not a writer. But I might have a separate column for each of us. Different people have to accomplish certain things during this, or if it's just one person, just say complete or something like that. Then you go into the rows. Now, here is where I'm going to do stuff like research. And notice as you're adding rows in here, you can add notes ahead of time, which is really nice. So I could add look at Google Docs, etc. You know, anything that is going to give other writers on the team more information. So this is where notes come in handy on my generic checklist. They're great if you're working on a team. So I might know exactly what research means, but other people might not, specifically things that you got to do. So then, you know, fix bugs, and what else was I doing? I was testing output. As I said, I've got like 25 things in here that I do. I'm just going to write a few of these in here. So this is different from the other kind of checklist because I'm manually putting in my rows. It's not pointing to any files or anything. It's anything that I want to track. So then I'll click OK, and it's just this simple right here. You don't have the breadcrumbs or anything. It's just a flat checklist. And then the notes are over here, and I could override the notes for this one, go in and retype it or add notes, but it is nice to have them, to be able to add them as you're creating your checklist. So it works kind of the same way. You just check things off, and it updates automatically until you get to the bottom. So those are really the two different kinds of checklists that I create. I could create all kinds of checklists though. Anything that you really want to track, you can create a checklist for it.
And so, I mean, I know we're doing a sample here and you only have two. I've had the pleasure of sort of looking over your shoulder and seeing real world how many checklists you actually do have. And you have quite a few, and you have a nice mix of things per project. So you have a lot more checklists in the real world than these two. How do you manage them?
That's a great question. Carefully. It's actually not that difficult. It's much easier than it used to be with the spreadsheets. So any release cycle, I'll have probably anywhere from 10 to 20, 25 checklists. It depends on the release cycle, how many features we've got that are going out. Most of those checklists are features, but some of them are maybe just extra things that I want to do. Maybe I'm writing a new tutorial and I want to keep track of that. So we do more frequent releases than we used to. We used to do yearly release, and so we had like 4.5 million features that would go into a release, and And so I would have a whole lot more checklists. Well, now it's more frequent. So I don't have that many that I need to control, that I need to keep track of. So it's actually, they mostly will fit in this space, and at a glance I can see what's going on with one, how far it is, what I need to focus on. But I also will rely on tasks to do that, to kind of keep track of all of these features and at a high level.
But if you need to create something quickly, like what if you decide you do want to work on that one thing, and you've done something similar in the past, how do you manage those kinds of things?
Okay, so like leveraging stuff you've already done?
Yeah. Can you do like,
okay.
What sorts of things do you guys do?
Okay, so that's a great question. That obviously happens because the release to do checklist is the same essentially for every product and every release, and the topic checklists are the same all the time for all of these. Well, you can see how many rows or columns I might have. Well, I don't want to have to go in and look at one and retype it every time. That defeats the purpose. That was the problem I was having with the spreadsheets. I was having to go in and manually do things. So the best thing to do is to use templates. And so I have 2 or 3 templates, one for each kind of checklist that I create. So an easy way to create a template is you first create a checklist. You can do it 2 ways, but right here I already have a checklist. Let's pretend that I've got 50 rows in here. All right, I don't want to retype those. So what I'll do is I'll go in here to edit the checklist, and I'll just click Save as Template. I can make any changes in here first if I want to, but I'll say Save as Template, and there was an error creating the template. Awesome.
It's the fun thing about doing things live.
This is what happens when you do. See how easy it was, Jen? Welcome to my world. Maybe it's because I have the same name or something. Let's go into the template manager, and we can create a brand new checklist from here. So release, yeah,
you already have one.
The joy of doing things live, isn't it? Release to do checklist. So I swear it does work. I've never actually had that error come up. So
it may not like that you're creating the one with the same name.
Yeah, it's
That's okay.
99% of the time it's your user error on my part. So I could come in here and I'm just going to do the same few things and create my rows in here. What did I want to do? Research and bugs and test output. Okay, so I created those, and I can save it, and I already have it. Yeah, so okay, that might have been the problem. I already have one with the same name in here, so I'm just going to add a 2 to that. I'll bet that's what the problem was. So I add that, and so you can see it adds it over here, or I can click Save and Close, and it'll close the whole thing. I get rid of this one, and I can just, and there I got rid of that one, and let's get rid of this one too, so that I'll create a brand new one. Okay, so I've got that one created. No checklist columns. I messed up. I'm having a banner day today. Oh, that's okay. Reset. This is the joy of doing things live, isn't it, Jen?
It is.
You get to do this all the time.
It's just Central helping you out. It's keeping you accountable.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Let's try this again. I'm going to rename this to do, and I got that stuff in there. Save as template. There, it worked. Okay, great. So that one's saved as a template. If I go into my template manager, there it is, and all the stuff that I set up is in there. Now, so I can create it that way if I already have one, or I could do my, I could create a new topics checklist. And so, well, that's the columns. So this is edit, this is metadata, you know, review, all that stuff that was in there. And then the settings, give it the name of a topics checklist, project files. We'll leave description out and we'll save that. And there's my topics checklist. Okay. Whew. If I knew what I was doing, we'd be 5 minutes ahead. All right, so I created my checklist, and now I want to create a new checklist. So I'll click plus, and I come in here, and let's say I want to do feature 2. Okay, so instead of selecting project files and going through the columns and rows, I just select this. That's my topics checklist. I could add a description. It's already going to put my columns in here for me. It's not going to select my rows yet because these checklists are all different. You got to go into each one and tell it, okay, what things do I want to track? You select save. Now I've got a second one. Now the release to do, I could do the same thing. I could click plus, and I could say, so this is for Flare 2020 to do. And instead of selecting generic checklist, I come in here and I say to do. It already has my description in there. It just carried over. It's got all of my columns. It's got all of my rows. Don't have to recreate anything, but I could edit this if I want, change it, click save. All that stuff's in place for me. So I rely heavily on templates. I only really created the first couple of checklists manually, like I first showed. And then after that, I just go and select a template. Now, every once in a while, I'll think, okay, there's something else I want to track in my topics. I don't just want to track these things. I want to add something. I want to track whether or not micro content is being done. And so I'll do that. That changes my template. Now, it's not going to affect the existing checklist. Those still have the same columns. It doesn't have micro content here. I could go in and put it in. But any new ones that I create based on that template is going to have the new micro content one. So templates are a must. You got to use those. First thing is, though, figure out what kinds of things you want to track. What are your checklists? I would figure as much of that out as possible before you create these things, so that you're not having to go in and adjust and adjust and adjust.
Yeah, it's a good time saver. I interrupted you. You were going to go talk about tasks, but it's actually interesting because it's a question I get asked a lot when I'm talking about this with folks and helping them get everything set up. They, you know, the common question is, well, why do I need checklists if we have tasks? You know, how are they related? Why would you use one over the other?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the easiest answer that I would give for that is tasks. They're related. It's not that they're entirely different, but they're used for different purposes. And the easiest way to explain it is tasks are high level, checklists are low level. So you can see the level of detail that you can get into a checklist. You can create tons of rows and tons of columns and all kinds of things you want to track. Well, let's go over to the tasks page, and it looks like this. So 3 columns that are provided in here: to do, in progress, completed. And this is, it's a task board, or people call it a Kanban board. Remember the first time I heard the word Kanban, I had no idea. I was like, what is that? I had to look it up. And so it's kind of interesting looking into it. It actually kind of did start with sticky notes in a way. Maybe not sticky notes, but signs. I think Kanban is Japanese and means sign or something like that. So people would put sticky notes or signs up on the wall. I think it started in the auto industry, and they would keep track of what are the things we got to do. And it was really these 3 milestones: either we got to do it, we're doing it, or we're done with it. And so there's all kinds of tools out there for Kanban boards, and this is the one in Central, and I do use this. As I said, most of my time is in the checklist because those are the weeds, but I do use this. So when we have a new release, I'll discover, oh, we're gonna try to put this feature out, and so I'll create a new task card for that. And you can do things in a task that you can't do in the checklist. So you can set the priority level on it. I can say whether it's low, medium, or high. I can estimate hours. I can put start and end dates on this thing through this calendar. When am I going to start it? When should it be finished? Anything like that. I can associate it with a project. I can assign it to another user. I can put description in it. There's a discussion, there's attachments you can do. So what I usually do, I don't often use the attachments. Every once in a while there might be like an image or something that I need to attach to the thing, and I can go in here and just make it part of that task card. But I do use the description field. So what I use this for is I might put in the dev lead. Who's the dev lead? And it might be like Susan. And then I might say, who's the QA lead? And maybe it's Conrad. And so I know who to talk to when I've got questions and I'm working on documenting this. I know who are the people. And then internally we have a tracking system for everything we're doing. We have these PBI numbers, and I don't know what it is. I think it's product backlog item or some peanut butter ice cream, I'm not sure, something like that. And so I might put a link to the URL, so it's quick access. I know exactly where a lot of the details are. Or there might be a Google document, and so I might paste the link to the URL for the Google document, so I'm able to go in and keep track of all that. So it's really useful information that you have, but this is all high level. Now, feature one, I don't want to click in this description area and write all of the topics, names of all the topics and all the things I got to do. That's not what tasks were designed for. So that's why checklists are so useful, because you can get into the dirt, into the details there. I'll click save, and it starts out by putting it here in the to-do column, and I could add as many tasks as I want, and then as I'm working on them, or anybody is, you can just move them from in progress to completed, wherever it fits for those to be. So I will refer back to these. I normally will start out a release creating the task cards and putting this information in here, and then periodically I'll refer back to it because I want to look at the Google Doc or something like that. And it's just a high-level way of controlling where things are. But then, yeah, I go into the checklist to do the real dirty work. I don't even remember what the question was, or even if I answered it.
No, you did. I was trying to see, how do you sometimes blend the two together? Like when, how can you use both to help you out and stay organized? And it sounds like, they are two different things, where the tasks are very high level. Checklists are definitely more detailed. You can certainly put a link to the checklist in here, I suppose, if you really wanted to.
That is actually something that I'll do. I will. So I could go into, let's go back to the projects, to the checklists. And let's get this feature one. Now, as soon as you open up the checklist, there's a URL for it up here, and I could just copy that. It's its own unique URL, and then I could go back here and say, well, this is the task card that has to do with that checklist. So I might add another row in here. It says checklist, and then I just paste in that URL. So then later on, I'm working on lots of things, and I come back and I go, oh, and I'm looking up information in here, and I go, okay. And just to get to the checklist real quick, I'll copy this and paste it into the URL field, and it will open it up immediately to that specific location. So that's a way, that's sort of a poor man's way. It's actually a future request I have. I'd like them to be able to connect a task to a checklist so I could just click it and open it up, but that's not in yet. So that's sort of my workaround to do that. I see a link between tasks and checklists, definitely. For every task I have, I almost every task I have a checklist, and vice versa. So they kind of work hand in hand.
And so what do you obviously meet with R&D quite a bit. You have to go into these, executive team meetings, and everybody wants to know where everything is. How do you use the checklist data when you walk into these meetings?
Yeah, the answer's right here in front of us. It's so nice. I might be, and these days everything is remote, and so I can have my central license open here, and I can quickly open up this and see. I could rattle it off. I could say I'm 80% done with this. I'm 72% done with this. Well, what needs to be done? And I could look over here and say, well, I've still got to do, it's still got to be reviewed or whatever. The other thing that you can do is, back when we first started on the homepage, we had these widgets. And so these were widgets that I already added in here. You can add widgets for all kinds of purposes. These that you see here are keeping track of things like broken bookmarks and in my project that it's found, or things that are live, outputs that are live that are out there. Well, one of the things that you can do, click on this button up here and you select checklist. Click add, and it's going to open up this little object. And it's blank at first, because just because you select checklist, Central doesn't know what to put in it. You got to tell it. So as you go up to this gear, and then you drill down and you say, well, it's for this project and it's this checklist. That's what I want to do. And then you just click off of it, and it gives you this nice little graphic in here. So I could just open up my dashboard, and there's dashboards at the home level and at the project level, and this one's at the home level. And so I could just quickly look at this and go, hey, I'm 82% done. Here's all the data down here. So I can give really quick answers to this. And another nice thing about this is, notice you got the breadcrumbs here too, and these are clickable. So I could quickly click on this and go to my project, or I could click on this and go to my checklist, like that. So those are just a couple of tips and tricks to just have the information at your fingertips. It's really nice.
Yeah, that's really cool. In fact, I was going to ask, how do you come in the morning, you log into Central, how do you kind of gauge what's going on? And I think those widgets are fantastic, and you can actually duplicate them and configure them very quickly, because obviously you have a lot of checklists that you're keeping track of, not just one. Maybe you want to keep an eye on a checklist that a teammate is doing, just to make sure things aren't getting overloaded or things aren't falling behind, for example.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can do that. I can do that by just clicking on this and say duplicate, and there's the same thing. But then I can go in and I could say, but I want to now look at that checklist. That one's I haven't been. Maybe that's another writer, and I got to go yell at them because they haven't done anything. Yeah, so
Right.
you can quickly duplicate and create these widgets. They're really easy to do.
What other any other tips you would give folks as they're thinking about using things, or things to be mindful of if they're going to be thinking about implementing checklists and tasks?
Okay, let me think here a second. Well, one thing that I would tell people to keep in mind, and this goes for not just working between Flare and Central, but it's just how to work in general in Flare, and that is, you try to have a plan together for where files are going to go and what they're going to be named. You want to, every once in a while, you have to rename things and you have to move things around. And I get that, I do that. But you want to limit that as much as possible. I do know that, especially with source control, that can become a real pain when you start doing that, and then you don't have a file that you thought you had, or you have one that you didn't think you had. And the same thing happens when you are transferring files up to Central. So I might have a topic that's in a checklist somewhere. And then down on Flare, on my desktop, I decide, oh, I want to rename this thing. I don't really like the name. Okay. Or I want to move it. Okay. So you do that, and then you sync with Central, and then you go up onto Central, and sure enough, the old topic is gone and the new one is there. It really sees it as a new topic and the old one's deleted rather than a move or a rename. And so it's there. But the thing is, if you had marked things in your checklist, you checked things off, it's not going to be, you're not going to see those things checked off anymore, or you might not see it in the checklist. You might have to add it in. So that's just something to be mindful of when you're renaming and moving and deleting things. That's just kind of something in general to keep in mind. The less that you have to do of that, the easier things are going to make. It's going to make things easier for your life.
Right. Well, that's a good tip. Well, I'm looking at the time. We're sort of rounding out the hour here. I think what I'd like to do is just encourage, we've got a couple questions coming in. If anybody has any questions about what we're talking about today or workflow, please feel free to drop it in the question panel. In fact, for anybody who's curious, we've got a wonderful comment about this word Kanban, if anybody's curious. So thank you for the attendee that defined this, and you were right, Paul. So it turns out Kanban is like a signal, and it did originate in Japan at Toyota. So thank you for
was
that.
that right?
You were right.
Okay, I was guessing.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of cover a couple things. So a couple questions are coming in. So let me just take this over here. So hopefully you can all see my screen. I just want to remind everybody that, you know, I know we're talking about Central here, but I would encourage you, you know, during this time, you know, a lot of us are remote. We have some time to beef up our learning. I would encourage you, if you want to start taking some of your Flare skills to the next level, we do have promotional pricing on our intermediate and advanced training courses, and we've sort of been doubling down on what we're offering to accommodate everybody. And I hope you can take advantage of this. You can save $100 on the intermediate and advanced training course. If you have any questions about that or registering, contact sales. It's sales@madcapsoftware.com, or your sales rep, or you can contact me. I'm happy to help. And there are also promotions on Central. So if you don't have it yet, or if you don't have the MadCap authoring and management system, which is a wonderful bundle that includes Flare and Central and our other tools at a really good price, you know, contact us and we can always help with that. And kind of going back to the Central thing and pricing, you know, if you don't have Central yet and you're curious about testing this and testing it in your own environment, I'll just remind everybody that there is a 30-day trial you can sign up for on our website. And it's really easy to sign up. You get a link, you create a password, and you have a secure Central account that you can test in your own environment and give it a go. And all of the features are there for you, even the output analytics and all of the tasks and everything. So if you're curious, you know, no commitment, you can always just try it in your environment, which is a wonderful way to get familiar with it. And then the last thing I just want to remind everybody is that we will be, you know, hopefully everything's going to be great by the time September comes around, but we are still planning on having Mad World in Austin this year. We've extended the early bird discount so you can save up to $1,000 when you register by June 30th. So if you hop on over to our site, we have lots of details there, but we did want to extend that discount to everybody. So we've got a few minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about questions. So one question that was interesting is, you know, this notion of tasks and checklists. Who can see those things in Central? You know, we talked about subject matter experts and authors. How do we, you know, who sees them? Who are they for?
So anybody can see a task. Now there's different types of users in Central. There's authors and there's subject matter experts. Now, a subject matter expert, all they're going to have access to is the review page, so they're not going to even have that. Now, pretty much anybody on the license is going to be able to see them, but it's locked down as far as who can do what with tasks. You have to have, just like lots of things in Central, you have to have certain permissions. You can give people, some people permissions to create the tasks and other people permission to you know, manage them. But pretty much anybody can just go in and see them. So yeah, that's not an issue.
Yeah, and then you can also filter and organize them. So that's one thing that I do with my team is we have a pretty busy task board. There's lots of things going on. It's nice to be able to filter and see, you know, what have I scheduled for myself? What have others scheduled for me, and vice versa. So we can tidy up that task board if we want to just really focus on stuff that we're working on individually.
Yeah. Do you want me to show that real quick, or?
Sure. Let me give you. Yep, whenever you're ready, you can show your screen.
Okay, so let's go into tasks again, and I just have the one task now, and that one I think I gave to Carl Spackler, and let's give this one to Lloyd Dobler. There's a task, and then I might have I might have another task that's for me. I'm going to just leave that assigned to me. So I've got 3 tasks in here, and one of the nicest things is I can quickly see what are my tasks and what are other people's tasks. So I can just click on this, say, what are my tasks? And it just filters it. So I only see mine. I get rid of all the other noise. And I can click all tasks to go back to see everybody else's. Another cool thing is you can also, if you get a ton of these tasks in here, you can expand and collapse them. You can expand or collapse everything like that. And then there's this ultra filter thing.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go in here and you can put dates in. You can do it by specific users. I could say I want these 2. And so I just see those 2. And so the filters is really nice thing. You can easily clear it. So
cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Another great question came in. Well, not so much related to tasks and checklists. I think it's a really good question for everybody on the call and for this recording. I get the question a lot, and just to kind of clear up some confusion. So thank you for the person who asked this question. So if you're using Git source control integration, can you also sync the project in Central? You know, is it a one or the other? Would you have to unbind from your existing Git in order to sync to Central, or can it be bound and sync to Central and Git at the same time?
Yeah, so they're asking about what we call a dual bound.
Dual bind. Yeah.
Dual bound relationship. So actually, if I had a graphic, I have a graphic, but that's okay. I'll just tell you. Yes, I do this. I actually use what we call a single bind, and I use a dual bind depending on what my projects are. So most of my projects are bound to Git already, but then and I want to use that because I use branching. I use certain things that are really important to me, but I also want to put these up on Central. So I'll have this dual binding. So I'll have my first binding to whatever provider there is, and so it can be Git, it can be Subversion, Perforce, whatever, and then you just have this second binding to Central. So what you're doing is when you're working locally in your Flare project, you're using that first binding most of the time, and then you get to a certain point, and it's in the central window pane in Flare, and just this little button where you click and you push it up, and so that's your second binding. And then if you don't already have something, you go, well, I don't use source control. Well, that's fine. You just bind your project to Central, and that's a single binding. It's just one thing going on. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, so in other words, there's flexibility. You don't have to undo what you normally like to do and just use Central. You can have both going on. Central has to see our projects, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Well, I want to thank you, Paul. I'm looking at the time. I want to be mindful we have folks joining from all over the world, which is so great. We're right at the end of the hour. I want to thank everybody for joining today. I hope this was helpful. Just to give a quick peek on what's possible here in Checklist, because again, it's a wonderful feature, and we wanted to give it some exposure and let you know where they are and how you can work with them and play with them to help keep you on task and on schedule, on time, stay organized. So it's been a lot of fun. So Paul, thanks so much for your time today. And I wanted to thank everybody for joining. I really hope this was helpful. And again, we will send out a recording. So if you had any audio issues or you had to drop off, no worries. We will get you a link to everything when it's all done and rendered. So thanks so much, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week. And we hope to see you on one of our upcoming webinars soon. Thanks so much. Take care.